So hello to everyone at the next session in our continuing education series. We were kind of away in July and August, so this is the first session after kind of a short summer break. This is, as you know, our core program in Seven Community, done in partnership with Photoings. And today we are very happy to have Sergio Valenzuela-Escobedo with us. Sergio is so many things: artist, researcher, curator, editor, educator, but I would say most of all, a very inspiring person. So I'm super happy, Sergio, that you responded to our request to do this lecture, as well as doing a workshop in 2 weeks' time. But I'll tell you all about that a little bit later. So when we met with Sergio in Arl this summer, we were discussing a little bit what would be interesting for our community. And I did say that we do a lot. We have kind of a demand for let's say sequencing, editing. People are curious about exhibitions, about contexts for photography. So we said we would kind of go more into that direction because, as I mentioned, Sergio is also a curator. He worked extensively with Mathieu Asselin, who we had in continuing education series last year. He talked specifically about research about his project Monsanto, which Sergio curated in various different contexts, if I understood that well. Then he also curated exhibitions at Rencontre, the festival in Arles. He did various other projects, for example, for the photo festival in Lodz. He was just recently in Porto as well for the photography biennial. And he's also been a jury member quite a lot. So he's been, I think, judging last year World Press Photo. Then this year you've been in Aral, a judge for Discovery Award. So you have super busy life. So thank you really for joining us, and I think we're all of our community is super excited to learn from you and to hear more about your work.
Thank you, Nika. Thank you for this invitation. I'm very happy to be here with you in a sunny day in Paris. I'm pleased to be with you. As Nika mentioned, this lecture today, it will be focused in curation somehow, but we will go through my different, as you say, characters somehow, which is from artist becoming a researcher, from a researcher becoming a curator, all this in the uh, frame of photography specifically, even though I do videos and I do work with time, worked in many different parts in the world. This time I will be focusing in this. So the lecture will be organized in two distinct parts. So first I will present some concepts of my work as a curator and as a researcher, and then I will go deep in one project specifically, which is Forêt Géométrique, so Geometrical Forest, from a Chilean French collective called Ritual Inhabitual. So, as you know, I mean, I'm not gonna. Some of you have been here and you come often. The questions, I'm very happy if you have a very important one to even write it in the chat or just drop it in because even though sometimes these lectures are kind of a monologues, I'm also very happy if you kind of talk to me about whatever you feel or just we could discuss it later. So let me start sharing a presentation, which I have here. All right, so I will start this lecture with as I said, with this presentation about my work. I always like to introduce the presentation, the lecture with this quote of Claire Bishop. So postcard, faxes, and email printout light only in a vitrine. A plywood shelving unit hold rows of information and leaflets. One gallery wall is plastered with graph and charts. Another is covered in hundreds of seemingly identical photographs. On a bank of video, monitors and talking heads are explaining something. In a darkness corner, a slide projection clanks slowly through a carousel of images. Nearby, a 16 millimeters film whizzed alongside a sporadic voiceover. An illuminate table is covered up with papers and newspapers, clipping marked up with post-it. Every object on display is accompanied by a length of explanatory caption written by the artist, also available as a pamphlet. If any of this sounds familiar, you have been in the presence of a research-based art. So this lecture is called Photography, It's Not Enough. And as I said, I will start telling you how do I get as an artist to become a researcher and then as a curator. So in my career, I early start with this picture of Man Ray doing a poetic analysis of this image. It was very important for me to understand at that period of time that photography was not all about going out and taking pictures. That somehow, in this particular case, this image, which looks to me like the desert of Atacama, which is where I come from in Chile, um, make me think that an image could also be something that we create. At the very beginning of my life, I was just about straight photography, somehow going to the street and understanding that photography was the real. But this picture really, really changed my life as much as it makes me start writing. This picture was found in this book, which I recommend to some of you. Is The Last Picture Show of Douglas Fogel. So The Last Picture Show is a group exhibition of artists using photography from 1960 to 1922. This is very quickly my first research I did on this picture. So this picture is what it shows. Actually, it's an artwork called A Large Glass from Marcel Duchamp, which somehow I imagine that I could go deeply understanding that work if I transform it somehow into the landscape. So actually what you see here, it's a picture taken by Man Ray of the large glass, which is flattened in the surface, full of dust. And myself is as an artist, as a conceptual work, I decided to went to the real desert of Atacama and using the map of this part of the large glass in order to drive and then to understand somehow the work which was presented. So this is a series of pictures which I did at that time. As you could imagine, I was myself the artist and using my camera in order to do my work. Later, I become so understanding that I wanted to follow in research. I started doing a very long research on archives in relationship to an expression which was very interesting to find out, which is Tumayacha Alacana. So Tumaya Chelacana, it means, why are you looking me under a veil? This was a sentence pronounced by, at least recorded by a French scientist in the Mission Scientifique Française in 1982. So that means that some of the indigenous community which live there had a sentence or had invented a sentence for the photographic act. So actually what you see here, as you may know, some of you, photographers, which at that period of time called themselves operators, used this black cloth in order to focus and then do the pictures. So that sentence took me to this long research, which is the writing of my PhD on relationship to the arrival of the camera in the southern globe hemisphere, which is from Chile to Brazil. What happened in this research is I understood that I could somehow wanted, I understood at the same time, but I wanted to become a curator. I had a feeling that I was somehow not engaging much with the fact that I needed to sell my own work. So I wanted to help and then to work with artists, but not necessarily doing myself my own work. So what I did in this diagram, which you see here, it's quite important to understand diagrams in my thinking in order for you then to imagine yours later. So this is a word that we're going to be using in the workshop, as Nika said, in 2 weeks' time. So this diagram shows the photographer behind the veil and the Native American or the Native Southern American here looking at the camera, which is kind of the classic model that someone could imagine in a photographic act. So what I did is that I stayed in this place here as the témoin, which is looking at the same time at the camera and at the Native America. So I did not do any more image about the folklorization of Native American, and I decided to step aside, leave the camera here in this particular place, and place myself here looking at the camera in order to make my research in order to find for a specific place in my research. So these are some pictures of the archive that I was looking up for my work. I'm sorry, I'm gonna go a little bit fast, and I don't want to spend too much time in my own research, but I would like to know where I to you to know to understand where I come from in order to understand how I work. Because if not, then it can be a little bit messy for what I will be showing on relationship to Ritual Inhabitual's geometric forest. So here it's the notion of the diagram, which I always think that it's kind of very, very useful for me to map my projects and to map my research in order to understand what are the consequences in this particular case of the arrival of the camera. So these methods of diagrams then create sometimes, which is in this particular case, the floor maps of the exhibitions. So from here, which was of course a very quick hand written and draw of my ideas, which are mental maps, then I invent the floor map for the exhibition, which happened in the School of Arles. This is very quickly some pages of the PhD has somehow 385 or 400 pages. These are some of them for you to see also how visually a PhD is. In this particular case, mine PhD was done and actually researched through images. Some of you might maybe think that research or artistic research could be involved into too much reading, which it does, of course. It's part of our work as a researcher, but actually it's more about how do we work with images in order to do a research, which is not the same research that a science, social science, for example, could do. So here are some pictures of my book, and then some of the exhibitions I did with the research of this incredible trip that also start from France, going to the south of Chile, taking the first pictures of Native American community, and then heading even to Australia. So I'm so sorry that I will not jump into this incredible journey because I don't have time, and this is not the idea for today's lecture, but this is a little bit of what and how it looks in the exhibition. So you may see that it changed from horizontal to vertical. These are some concepts also that we will be looking at later. So yeah, this is somehow the moment where I become a researcher and putting my camera aside, understanding that the situation for me was that I needed and I wanted to become a curator at that moment of my life. So this is the book, which was done then later on the archive that I work with in order to make the research. It is not the thesis, it is the artistic version of the thesis, which was done in Pali Books by Jan Lenza, which is the graphic designer. So once the artist become the researcher somehow, then even though things are never so chronologically clear, I decided to start working as a curator, which was even a little bit before I finished my PhD. So I will show you quickly some of the work that I've done. I'm not going to spend so much time in some of them. If some of you have some questions about it, I will be happy to answer. So many of them, as you see, and as some of you might remember the first quote from Claire Bishop, you will definitely find a lot of documents, a lot of archive material, a lot of images, a lot of pictures, but also sound, videos, and different elements that we create a project which could be defined as a multi-layer project. And this is why maybe some of you have this in mind still, that why do I say that photography is not enough? It is because I think that for complex stories, we need complex display and complex for ways of narrate our own story, and that means that we can go and look for different materials which still very visual ones in order to create what have been this trying to define as a perspective documentary, which is actually the notion of bringing a lot of eyes, a lot of perspective to one work, which kind of opposed to the notion that the photographer, which is by himself, always looking through the viewfinder in a camera. In these particular cases that you will see in this different exhibition, we always will find different narrative, bringing all them together into one project. So this is Ipamamu, History of Wawaim. This is very quickly Herzog trying to shoot a film in Peru, and then the community putting him out from. So he failed his first attempt to shoot Fritz Carraldo, which was the movie, and these artists, which are a collective, French collective, went to document all the consequences that this brought to the community, and how did community engage together as a self-government somehow way of acting, a social way of acting against Herzog and his team, bringing this notion that they wanted to shoot actually Fritz Carraldo in their own community. So some pictures of the exhibitions. This it's Mama Coca. It's a story of the coca leaf, Nadej, when it's been many years in Colombia shooting the NASA community, and what happened last year, if I remember last year, Coca-Cola company, which you might know, focused on the idea that no one could use the word coca in any product. So the community has brought to the market their own drink, which is Coca Nasa, and then Coca-Cola company became a little bit worried about it, and then they took it to the court. So actually, the court is now deciding what will be the situation with the coca, the use of the coca word. So the project kind of retrace the notion of the ritual, the coca, the way that the coca leaf is used on the communities, and then there is a little black and white frames that you see here. Those are the use of coca in other part of our own history. So here you see some of the pictures of coca. My Oro Verde, it's a project with Ritual Inhabitual. It's my second project with this collective, Chilean-French collective, which was a work about the consumption of avocados, specifically in Cheran, which is a city in Mexico City. So how the mafia, the cartels have taken over the community's forest in order to plant the avocado trees, and in order to then, of course, sell it and make this a very healthy fruit, but also a very healthy business for some of the narco dealers that now are selling the avocados. Monsanto, as Nika told, I'm not going to go into details. I might just wanted to discuss one notion which I think is important in this project, that maybe you hear it from Mathieu, but when we were invited to the Deutsche Börse Foundation Prize in 2018, the room was very small in relationship to the big show we had in Arles at that period of time, and we started thinking on the notion of the sponsoring. Who are the sponsors, and who are actually the people for who we work for somehow. So it was very tricky for us to decide that we had to accept this nomination, in order to be in the photographers gallery in London, because the sponsor, which is the Deutsche Börse, sells Monsanto stock and Bayer stocks at that period of time. Maybe some of you remember, Bayer was about to buy Monsanto. So Mathieu's pictures were already in the newsprint, and we decided to use the pictures from the newsprint, not a specific photograph done by Mathieu, but the ones that were printed. So we use and we scan the newsprint and we use them in the exhibition, just to understand and to show. So you can see here at the left the corn image in the newsprint. I think it's Libération. In order to understand that those images had a circulation, in order to show how important it's in this particular social engaged project, that pictures, images, and the work and the stories that you are telling also need to somehow break the bubble of the gallery. If that, of course, is possible. We never know actually if the political answers of this are going to be good, or what will be the consequences for us. But actually nothing happened. This is one of the pieces that we have to invent in order to say something on this, which was the decision that me and Mathieu had. So we took two tablets, we download their free app, so Deutsche Börse free app, and we put Monsanto and Bayer in next to each other in order to somehow, in a way, show that the sponsor is dealing with the idea of selling stock market from these two multinationals, which finally was bought by Bayer. So also part of this notion, which I want to share here, it's the notion of the organics exhibition. So we discussed very quickly on what is the perspective documentary. So it's bringing different points of view together into one project. This was, I will be speaking quite in detail in the next project, so Ritual Inhabitual Forest Geometric. But here, what was important for Monsanto is that the message had to be out. And then, as we were doing the project, Bayer was buying Monsanto, so we start changing somehow the newsprint, but also the exhibition was changing, and was, of course, we got many calls for different venues, and we had to invent how to show Monsanto in different ways. So I will show you in these very few images how an exhibition, or how as a curators we decide to translate first the book, which was designed by Ricardo Baez, to a big show in Arles, and then how to make it happen if we need to exhibit in a school or in a different venue, which was not big or fancy as some of you could imagine. So here's some of the exhibitions that we hold in Hasselblad Foundation, in Photographers Gallery, in Australia, if I remember well, and in Tobe Gallery. So this is somehow the, I will set my presentation as a curator. So I'm gonna go now to Forest Geometrique. So this is Geometrical Forest. This is a project that comes after Monsanto in my life. So I've learned from Monsanto many, I would say, many strategies. This was a very interesting project, which we allow us to experiment somehow, and then to learn how to present documentary photography, yes, but with the need of some other elements in order to tell the story, the complex story of this project. So Geometrical Forest happened in Chile. So here in this map, I show you exactly the region where this project was happening. This project started an investigation which described the ecological and the political consequences of monoculture forest in southern of Chile. So it highlights the conflict of two worldview, Chileans and Mapuche, which Mapuches are the Native American communities living there, of course, before the Chileans arrived. and the Spanish conquerors arrived too. So one of the vision is of course based on free market economy, and the other one considered the relationship to the environment as a spiritual one. So this project initiate a debate on our relationship with the environment as photographers, of course, and our mode of consumption, because as you may imagine, some of maybe all of us use paper in order to print our work, in order to print our book, or just to use it in our life. So that was the main topic of the project. So the exhibition offers an illustration of this artistic research, which I'm trying to show you or to talk to you today. Trying, of course, to challenge dominant narrative and denouncing injustice and hold those in power accountable, which is what we hope with some of these social engaged projects. So this is an introduction on the work done by the collective Ritual Inhabitual. The collective, it's each time a project start, the collective build itself, which is also part of the notion of working with teams, which is mainly what we have designed since Monsanto. It's that there is a graphic designer, there is a curator, there is a photographer, but there is also poets, there are also ethnobotanists, there are also, in this particular work, there's science people coming to the table in order to discuss the project all together. So this is why the collective built itself depending on the project. I will go now a little more deep in each of the series of this work so you understand what is what is it about. So we also publish a book, which, as you may know, each of the exhibition could, I will say, could have a book, or somehow sometimes the book comes first and then later the exhibition. But there are two devices which are very related to each other in the way of that we work and that we articulate our ideas. Sometimes, and even while I'm doing the book with the photographers, with the collective, I'm already thinking of the exhibition. And sometimes when the exhibition is happening, the book is not ready, it's also the exhibition which is feeding the book. So there is kind of a back and forward. I might say that I don't have any preference if the book should be first or the exhibition should be second. But both of them have this influence into each other's creation. So the work was done by these two. So the photographic specifically, so the land work, somehow the field work, was done by two photographers, Florencia Grisanti and Tito González Garcia, and they went to Chile because they heard a story in the Museum of Natural History where she works, that there was this community that it was Mapuche community that have a very important new system of hospitals, which they could use their plant in order to heal their community. So they wanted, so it's quite new to Chileans. This is not being something, it's not being around since many time, since long time. So they start by looking to the story, which was the notion of these hospitals that were around the city, but around the town in La Araucanía, so that region where I show you in the map. By being there the first time, they understood and they realized that that was definitely happening, but it was not the most important problem that this community have. Actually, the community start discussing with them that the problem was that the forest industry, the pulp paper industry, was so much a thirsty industry that the native forest was kind of going out. So the pharma for the Mapuche people, which are their trees, which are their plants, was so far away that now the healers, which are shamans, which are called machis, did not find their plant anymore close to them. So they needed to travel very, very far away. So actually the project kind of shift once being there. So they went to Chile because they live in France. They went to Chile for 5 years in different period of time, and they decide to use wet collodion plates. Maybe some of you will, of course, come very fast with the question why they use this wet collodion process, which is a very, very slow process. And this is actually the reason why. So they mentioned to me from the very beginning that they did wanted to spend time in order to get in touch with the people they photograph. That means that just not coming with a camera, with a digital camera and shooting and then leaving, they wanted to invent like a ritual between them and the photograph. So this is one of the reasons they use wet collodion plates in this particular project. Here you can see them, the team. You can see the team working in the studio, in the atelier of Florencia. At that period of time, we did not have a book. It was more about thinking on the editing process of the chosen plates, and actually the project was not yet finished. Just for you, maybe it's interesting to have some anecdotes on how this small world of photography works. Is that as a curator, I went to see the director of the festival at that period of time, which was Sam Sturze, and he mentioned to me that he really likes the project, but he found that the project was not finished yet. So I came back home saying, listen, we don't have an exhibition. It's just the problem that apparently the project is not finished. So we did not understood that quite fast, and we start thinking on what was missing on the project. So we took 1 year to discuss, and then we understood why, and you will understand it now as soon as I show you the next series of work. So here, some pictures of the making of. So you see Tito with the field camera in Araucanía, some of the shamans that are being part of the photographed sessions. So this was done in a road trip during each time they went, they had to take this car, which transformed itself into a dark room. So for, I mean, I guess that many of you know, but the wet column plate, they need to just, as the name says, they're wet, so they need to be uh, exposed and then very quickly develop. So this is how they did it, and they used this card, which become darkroom, in order to get the pictures right. So I will just tell you now, but maybe you will understand later. The reason why the project was not finished, it's because somehow the subject of Mapuche, of Native American community, was not very important for Europeans because they did not even know who they were. So at that period of time, we did not know that the pulp industry was about. When we present the project to the director, we did not have the series of work that you will see now in relationship to the pulp paper industry. So this is why we took 1 more year in order to finish. So somehow it's also to mention the notion of this organic. The project could be almost finished for some of you as photographers, but maybe the editor or the curator or even the director of the festival could come with this idea that something else is missing. And I think it's very important to include this in this notion of teamwork, which I mentioned before. So here you see the first draft of the floor plans, which we sent as curators, and then we got back the proposal from the festival team in order to create the work. And then, of course, some of the draft. I'm always trying to show the behind the scenes. I think it's very important to see how we work. I don't do 3D modeling. I don't like it, and I don't follow actually 3D modeling plans or even my own plans. I think that when you go to the space, even though you have think about the work, you know exactly where are the series, but somehow the space also speak to us. So we need to be very careful, at least in my opinion, we need to be very careful not to be so um, stiff, probably is the right word in English, to say that, to mention that some things can move also around the hanging. So this is the 3D modeling, and then here we go into the handling. So for the story, it was very important for us to get an herbarium, which is something I will show you now. So here is the team working. The notion of ecology, it's a very important one in this exhibition. Of course, the subject is ecology, so we imagine with the team how to think on a responsibly exhibition. I have the idea in my head that if we want to do an ecological exhibition, maybe we should just not do it, or just shut down the light and then be out of the space. So what we tried is to be at least the most responsible, in order to find solutions, visual solutions, in order to create the shows. Um, we will not find a formula. There is nothing that it's better than another one. I think that ecological aspect in exhibitions are very important, but depending on where you live, where the region, what is the country, I don't think that every single, I don't even, I don't think that even cities that are close to each other have the same solutions in order to create an ecological show. So I will also come back to this later when you see the print. So the project include ethnobotanist from the museum, which is called Flora Penek. Flora Penek traveled at that time with the photographers in order to do the research, and she got in contact with the Machi, with the shamans, which they allowed her to understand, and they allowed her to be part of some of the discussion on which were the specific plants that they use. So very interesting, the idea that they allowed her to be part of the discussion, but they did not allow her to tell to the rest of the world somehow what and how do you use those plants. So what she did is that she collect a series of plants with them, and she create a herbarium, which was one entered in the collection of Chilean Historic Museum, and then the second one entered on the collection of the French, the Parisian Natural Museum. So this is that series of work. Um, Something which is important in of course in the notion of the walking through, which is something that you can plan, you can dream about it, but it will never work. People do whatever they want. So even though it's important to imagine somehow how people are going to be walking around the exhibition, I believe that we should be very careful, because it never happens as we want. I mean, definitely you can help them to go to different places the first sight, but it's not as difficult. But this was my dream somehow. It's my dream walkthrough when at least I was doing the show. So here you will see the pictures of the shows already finished. um, so what you see at the right is the herbarium, which are pictures. So what you see here is not the plant itself. These are the scans, such a very high resolution scan done by the museum. So this is to me where the museum speaks. So they have their own voice on the problematic of the Chilean forest. Then in front of you, you have a chronology, which was done by another scientist in order to understand the history of Chile. It's somehow infographics, a very short version of what happened each year up to 2024, when the exhibition was happening in Arles. This is the festival in Arles. This is the first show we did with this exhibition. So yeah, here we this is something interesting. I think, as I mentioned before, when there this notion of the book helping the exhibition, or the exhibition helping the book, during the creation of the book, So you could find all these plants print in a very thin paper, almost like a Bible paper, almost like transparent ones. And once you put one in front of the other one, um, somehow someone said, yeah, but you know that those plants are always, they come into journals, I mean newsprints, because they need to dry. When Flora was taking them from Chile to France, they definitely needed to be dried in between papers. So what we did is that, just an idea of using that paper on the book, we decided to go and bring a new perspective. This is why we did it, is to bring the perspective of the press. So we went and find specific journals, newsprint that speaks about the problem of Mapuche communities in Chile, and we use them, of course, in this grid, but they also are, conceptually speaking, drying the pages inside the book. Which is what you see here. So these are the plants in the book. All the science notations, of course, are very important. But as I said before, never never how to use them or how to prepare them. So this is the interior of the show. You see the um, wet collodion plates in this blue area. Always a plant was next to humans. This is also to follow the cosmopolitics of Mapuche people in this particular project. This is to me a very important picture. This shows a very young group of musicians, which are some of them rappers. So as they were young and as they were growing, some of them moved to Santiago, and some of them understood that hip hop was a music and a style of music that could help their problems, that they could sing, they could be definitely singing what their feelings was. So they start singing in Spanish. Mainly, Mapuche families they had to quit their own language, and even for these young generations, they did never listen to Mapudungun, sorry, which is the language of their families. Some of them even they had to change their family names, because as Chileans we are very racist against this community. So they were all living in the south, where you see, remember that map, and some of them then moved to Santiago, which is in the center. But more important here is that thanks to rap, this community start then on grasping the notion that they could sing in Mapudungun. So they brought the letters back to their elders, and the elders translate them into Mapudungun. And then they figure out that elders also, when they were walking on the forest, had like a chant in order to talk to the trees and in order to talk to the birds. And that kind of sound, like hip hop, they need to be like you need to have some rhymes. They also had that. So that kind of traditional singing, which is ulkungtung, was mixed with hip hop, and that it's how this community, at least the young community, starts speaking or trying to recover a language, which is to me a very important moment in the story of the Mapuches in Chile. So another thing which I think it's very important to mention in this project is the posing. It was very interesting that one of the photographs, so which you see here, decide to bring this book, which is considered probably the most Western looked into community, which is, as you may imagine, the construct. It says in the cover of this book, is the construction of someone by the photography, which is what the explorers and the operators on different centuries did. So you take the position I tell you, this is the background you will use, and then we will somehow invent you as a native. This is what happened in this specific picture. So these Mapuche here were taken to an indoor place, and they had to somehow reenact the fact that they were giving milk to someone. But funny enough, that this picture could be, for some of us, a very Western perspective into a very colonial gaze into a community, is what she brought in order to sit with her own baby, in order to make the wet coloring pictures with Ritual Inhabitual. So it was very impressive, because which could be for us Westerns a colonial image, it could also be a different element from someone from a community. So I was very struck by this moment in this kind of posing when it comes to this series of work. So you see here Eko Young, which is this man with the mask, and then his wife. More pictures. I will go a little bit more further on in a series of pictures, which I also found very interesting, which is the forest, actually. So the idea of shooting these monocultures, and what gives the title to the book, which is Geometrical Forest, is as we imagine that we could depict from a viewpoint from the earth. We thought that we could have some perfect geometrical shapes into the pictures. But actually, what happened is that idea did not work. But even worse, some of the negatives that were used got some kind of a fungus by any how, we don't even know how happened. But that meant that we did not have too much pictures from this series, and we were quite sad, because one of the journeys of these photographers there did not kind of finally worked good enough for being select at the very beginning of the project. But as you will see, those pictures finally were very useful for the exhibition. um, what happened in this series, which is a new series. So all, maybe some of you think that these are new photographers, but they are the same ones. So as working in teams, we always sit before they leave, in order to understand how and what is going to be shoot. So as a curator, I also put myself as an editor somehow, or as a, I will say it as a, there is a notion of taking care, which I like a lot on curators. In Spanish is curador. It means curate. It means like to take care of something. And somehow it's taking care of all these details. I think that the work as a curator, which works in a research-based project, has to be definitely working with the photographers from the very beginning of the project, if that's possible, and then trying to work together, looking for all these details in order to take care of the project itself. So in this moment, it's what I mentioned before after the meeting with the director, is that we find out that we did not have the most complex part of the story, which is that those monocultures that are uh, at the, let's say, is at the end of the story, it's become the paper. It's like Monsanto. It's technology, the very, very, very high level used in plants in order to create the most perfect nature, the most perfect trees, in order to create the pulp paper. So what you see here at the right, or some of, yeah, you could see it also at the left, these geometric forests which are there, which it looks, at least to me, it feels like they were brothers and sisters, or cousins and family members, each of the different trees community. Actually, it's the same species that it's growing one to each other. And this is what biotechnology does in this part of the world. So we got the chance to be inside the industry of trees, where they do these clone trees in order to create forests, in order to create the paper. So here, some of the series inside the labs on the project. I think I mentioned, yeah, the notion of this fungus, which start which appear in one of these, in many of these pictures, which at the very beginning the photographers were quite sad because they say, well, we're not going to be able to use them at all. And actually, at the end of the project, which is what you will see when you turn the back and going back forward to the exit of the show, you will see how those incredible pictures finally were more than useful. So I'm maybe as a as a pose, I always say that generosity is very important in order to work with photographers and curators. It's very important for us that you are able to show us, to be generous in order to show everything you do, even if you find it not so good, even if you find it that it's not good enough in what you're looking for, because that brings a lot of clues for us to work and to sometimes react in order to give better ideas or better discussions in order to follow up the project. So always, at least if I am around, I will very happy if you are very, very generous in bringing whatever you find is not good, whatever you find it's not working. These are the moments where curators are also very, very useful, and in my opinion. So what will you see here? It's a piece, it's a video piece, which is it was done in the last journey that they did in Chile, and it was sorry, it was a sculpture of TVs, where actually we knew that the show was happening. So we did this piece specifically for the show, and we asked them what was their idea, what was their feelings in this industry that you have. Uh, Somehow for them, of course, they live very, very next to them. For some of them work in the industry too, so it is a problem. It's a social problem which is not easy to solve. It's not just to mention that you will cut the industry tomorrow, because it's the third industry, the most important industry in Chile, so the third one. And you can imagine how much work that brings to people that lives around, and at the same time it kind of started to become an ecological crisis. So the idea on this project, as I will say, that the big difference between Monsanto and this project was that Monsanto at least had a very clear message, a very, very an idea that was that Monsanto was the devil. And that was Mathieu's point of view, and it was perfect. In this particular one, we changed it. Of course, it's not mature. It's a collective working in another project. As I've said before, they are not formulas at all. Each project has their own complexities. This was to put everybody in the table in order to have different perspective, the notion of documentary perspectivism, bringing everyone on the table, and then the viewer will take a decision or will have an opinion. So here we turn around after the totem. It's a rewe, which is a very particular figure in the Mapuche culture, and then we decide that the it was incredible, because how to show how the forest is suffering somehow. We had, of course, the picture in the right of these roots that are kind of like suffering behind in the earth, naked, because of that the ground is kind of moving. But I really find that something interesting was happening with these images that had this horrible fungus at the very beginning. So they allowed me, and this is also, I always said, it's also about generosity, but it's also about uh, accepting that someone else will take decisions for you, and that you will have to trust him, her, or they, in order to do your work. So this is going back. It's where you see the forest cut and now produce or in the way of become paper. So here is the end of the show, where you see the series of the same series of biotechnology, the paper, the wood has been cut and now producing the paper, which is the same paper that we use. So that was also a very tricky part, because to be somehow critic or have a point of view or a message to say in a particular industry, which is paper pulp, was necessarily something that we as photographers, curator, and artists we have to deal with. So what we say, we tried actually to manage in the book, it's to calculate how many uh, trees were cut in order to make the book, which give us the number of 90, if I remember well. So in order to get a notion of how many trees are we cutting for making a book, I think it's 2,500 copies on this book. And of course, being part of the problem. I mean, not believing that because we are talking about the story, we are the ones that are not part of responsibles of the same problem. So that was somehow the position that we wanted to put ourselves in, meaning we are part of the problem as we are working on this project. Here some details on the chronology, so, which I talked to you before. Again, another perspective. So this is history. This is really facts that are bringing to the story. So we had the Mapuche view. We have the Mapuche view on the videos. They're speaking by themselves. We have the museum through the herbarium. We have the photographers telling their history in wet coloring plates, and then the history of the industry on the biotechnology. So somehow I trying to put here very clearly how these different perspectives came together into the project. We had also writers, of course, in the book that will help us to bring more perspective into the work. Um, just to finish, I will go very fast on the design. So here, Ricardo, the designer of Monsanto, came along again. Was this kind of friendship that was born through Monsanto, and then we start working since then in very different books. And he designed the book as you see here in the notion of a film. The idea of the movie was very important for him, as this was a road trip. The project was, as I said before, it was they were taking, of course, they take a plane to get to Chile, but then all the notion of going through the road was very important. And then he decided to design the book in the notion of this movement. So you will see that there is also the idea of the train, which is part of the graffiti and the rappers ideas that were coming from that chapter. So this is the train, which maybe some of you know, the idea, which is a bit of what I work in my PhD. The camera and the trains are two objects that comes together in the same moment of time in Chile. One could be the one that conquered the territory, the other one's the one that conquered the soul. So there is a very strong relationship between modernity coming to South America, which is so the fact that iron glass was coming into the region. So here, see some some test on the papers in order to create the project and to make it a book. The team, as I said before, very important. We do need people to work with us, at least in this research-based project. Everyone is very important, and we always try to thanks to everyone. So as you see here, of course, this is this the people here are also part of the exhibitions, part of the directors that work with us, and then of course the people within the collective that were working in this project. So I think I will finish here. I don't know if some of you have any questions or you want to discuss or something that maybe was not clear enough. Um, Happy to answer to any questions.
I did write in the chat for everyone. If you want to join us in the panel to ask a question later live, it's always nice, I said, to put a face to the question. So if you want, just write me either in the comments, or I think you can also do a private chat if you would wish to ask a question, like directly, not like in typing. But yeah, Sergio, thank you so much for this fantastic presentation. It's really so interesting to see. We had some like really nice comments. People were very excited and yeah, very inspired, I think. So if anyone has a question, please post it or send us. I would start with a question myself, because obviously you are lucky to work with venues that can allow for bigger teams, you know, but usually coming from maybe countries that don't have such an infrastructure in
Mm-hmm.
terms of, like you were saying, like you had a designer, you had
Mm-hmm.
editor, you were the curator, you did the book, you had researchers. So how should maybe a photographer approach their work when there is no curator or there's no editor? What to maybe do, especially with long-term and research-focused projects? Like, what can they do?
Yeah, that's a very good question because as I mean, I don't know if I mentioned it, but I come from Chile, and the situation in Chile it's not the situation in France. So somehow living in Chile also create or produce in me is this idea that I needed to be everything in a moment. I needed to be the one that is painting the walls. I needed to be the one that is gluing the captions, and I need to be the one that I'm doing the pictures and then cleaning, which is it's normal. And I think that that gives us a lot of strength. So we need to be careful to think or to see that how lucky this kind of Western contexts are. Why do we have to be careful? It's because by being in a context where the economic of the project it's a very tricky one, it just makes you more creative. So it's all about how do you manage to do your project as you want. Of course, you need to accept many things, and that is something that as a photographer, as a curator, you need to be very open, and that's where the creative and the artistic part I must admit it exists. So for example, accepting that your print will not be framed, no problem. No one has told us that all the prints need to be framed. And then uh, different sizings, of course you can deal with different sizing. You can actually, the most important thing to me, and as a curator, even if I go to an incredible venue, it's not about the quality. Of course it looks fancy what I showed, but it's more about, do you have something to say, and is the message present there? I will be able to understand that maybe the production was not high enough, but don't worry, we are looking to the story. We are looking to, if you have to say something interesting, on how do you say it through images. So even though sometimes you can jump into this kind of incredible lucky, I mean, some of us have been lucky in order to have this kind of productions. I don't think that, and this is the notion of organic exhibition I was mentioned through the show and through Mathieu's. We always need to have in mind that we need to put this in a more cheap way, in a very, in almost in a free way, depending on what the message is. And that means, and you will maybe not believe me, but coming to the ecological aspect of an exhibition, who do you think are the most difficult one to convince in order to create the show, which is an ecological show? That means your prints are not going to be glued into a diagram. photographers. No, 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 no. This is my picture. Please don't touch it. This has to be perfect. And you're like, come on. We discussed about, doing the show using. So as I maybe I did not mention it, but some of the prints that you see were print in the support. They had no paper in between. So we did try different ideas, but some photographers, uh, they're not really happy about it. How can I, So I think that we need to accept to change, to have this moment of transformation as a photographer, in order to accept the economical framework of a project, or the ecological one also. It's also a very important one. But I've seen and I've discussed with many production teams in different festivals, and yeah, photographers are not very happy when there is no glass frames. So yeah, I think you have to accept to to move, and we have to also to accept it. I'm not saying it's easy. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, thank you. I saw there's no questions yet. Maybe some will appear, but maybe going more into this ecological aspect of exhibitions now that you mentioned it, because we all want big prints, fantastic exhibitions, but what's left, like where did this travel? If you're lucky, you have a traveling exhibition, and you can reuse the prints, but like, are there any new approaches in how you curate or how you produce exhibitions that are a bit more sustainable to the others?
Listen, it's a massive subject. I just was in the consortium, which is a place here in France, and they are very worried about the heat in the spaces. They don't even know what to do. This year, they had to close down two of the galleries in order to make the show. So I think it's the core question when it come now for the institutions. And when it comes for photographers, I think we're quite lucky. I mean, somehow photographers, the medium of photography is quite lucky because it's quite, you could move it. It's the notion of fluidity in images. It's very interesting because in image today, it's a file, and that file could travel through internet and then somehow be printed in a massive, big PVC outdoor, or in a very, very high fancy art print, or this kind of. So we don't have to forget that which is the medium, and which are the I would say the chances that we have, that we are working with photography, even if it's, you know traditional photography. I mean, it's still paper. It's still something which is quite soft. It's still something that you could send somehow. I mean, imagine painters, imagine sculptors. Those people are in problems. So if we understand really that the photographic object, it's a very flexible one, and this notion of fluidity, I think we will manage to understand that we could not. It's not because you printed once that will stay forever. And I will say, each of you, wherever you live, try what is next to you. But you know what is funny about ecology, and specifically in Europe, is that there is. I will use these words. It might sound a little bit strong, but it's like a mafia. So you need a stamp to be an ecological printer, and the stamp, it's very expensive, and you need a stamp to have wood come that comes from a specific forest, but that it's very expensive. So in our exhibition, even though we wanted to have some wood from Arles, they did not have the stamp, and so for them they could not, the wood that was bought for the festival, for that specific exhibition, was not the one next door, because they did not have a stamp. So then you go into this kind of crazy uh, and complex discussion on what ecology is in each of our countries. So yeah, I mean, the only thing I can say that is that what our decision was in that specific show is that the most ecological way of doing something is to do it so good that you can reuse it. But I know that that could be discussed by many other possibility, which is printed, and throw it away, throw it away, throw it away. Until today, it's not a subject that has been too much discussed, and what the possibilities we saw were okay, but they are not the same in each country, and that is going to be tricky for taking decisions in a general aspect.
So now I'll show the question from Alejandra Orozco. So
Alejandro.
yes, so yeah, she just was also here at our camp having a exhibition, and she's doing a really brilliant project. So she's asking, why did you decide for this format at the end, and what was the motivation of having a photo book?
Incredible. Yeah, very good questions. So the motivation was not ours. It was the house edition somehow. I mean, I'm not going to blame them, but we got into the festival because the book will be published. So they have a place in order for us to exhibit. So we could not run away from it. But that question, I think it's even more important because I do agree that some projects today don't need a photo book. The book we did, even though I just show some pictures, it was to me and even to Ricardo, it's not even considered like a photo book because it has a lot of text. But let's put that away. It's to me, it should be now a decision, a very important one, because actually before COVID, it was quite cheap. I mean, quite cheap. It's never been cheap to make a book, but paper, the price of paper has been so high, and of course, the ecological impact of using paper is so high that now having an exhibition or having a book, it's and having both, it's too expensive. It's too expensive, and we all know that by publishing books with it will not create an economy for not even for the researcher or for the artist itself. So the the decision of the format, in our particular case, it was done with Ricardo, of course. I mean, some you might know that there is a specific format in papers in order to use and to put away the less possible. So the format was in relationship to the specific size in order to print all the paper, to cut the less, and to not to throw out anything that could be useful. The same thing happened on the exhibition. So you see those panels, wood panels, that in the floor, in the map, so in the floor plan, they have a specific measurement. We had to move them in order not to cut a new piece of wood and use it just because we needed 15 or 30 centimeters more, which then brought to create smaller print to those specific wood walls. So once again, I think that if we are in this kind of engagement, we need to have an idea, but accept it that organically speaking, it will move, and it will change. And if you allow that to happen, I think that it's the only way that we could at least try it. We can do mistakes. I think it's not necessarily always the right. I mean, you take a decision today, maybe it's the wrong one tomorrow, but at least you try, and you thought about it before. Uh, so yeah, I mean, I think today having a photo book or having an exhibition, it's a very tricky one. I will say that if you have to decide, I will say have a photo book. I think that it's something that is more useful, and at the end travels around easily. It's an incredible presentation card at the same time. Exhibitions only come few, and sometimes a very elitist part of this world come to shows, not necessarily people that are around in cities coming to the shows. You know what I mean? So yeah. I don't know if I answered the question, but I think Alejandra, you tell me.
Yeah, if you'll have a follow-up question, Alejandra, just feel free to write it. Then, link to this discussion as well, Anastas has a question. What do you think of kind of digital virtual exhibitions? How
Well,
common is that? I assume also the design is quite complex, and maybe what's the impact from your experience?
for my experience, I've been trying to look for a good virtual exhibition, and I haven't found yet. I've been quite shocked, but what I've seen. Uh, First, sometimes Paris Photo they have tried this kind of booth, digital booth, but are like very bad solutions. Some artists, I think that the digital medium is an interesting one to understand it as a space to show, but not to do an exhibition itself as we imagine it. I think that the web still has had a potential which is incredible, but I haven't seen so much virtual exhibition. Even websites sometimes they just become some kind of a vitrine just to see click, 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 and then I don't see too much. Even digital books have been, not very interesting until now. Because I think that it requires a lot of work to understand the medium itself, which is a screen and it's not paper. So totally digitally, I will say yes, let's go. I mean, still, it's not. I mean, about ecology, it will not help. Probably, the discussion will not be closed because we do digital exhibitions. But I think it's a very interesting way to go. I'm thinking a lot of video games in this moment when it comes to this discussion. So somehow you go into this world, you travel around those worlds, and those worlds. I'm not a player. I mean, I'm talking about what I see, but I mean, I used to play maybe once, Doom or the first video games that appeared when I was a kid. But that idea of entering a space and moving around and then finding something, but not necessarily using walls, not necessarily using uh, gravity, which is crazy about video games, is that gravity does not exist. So we have to deal with gravity when we do exhibitions. We have to do with physically hanging because then it will not it will fall, which gives us a completely crazy freedom will be to uh, to to think on this notion of video games that could help us to imagine an exhibition space, but I will not say an exhibition. I mean, it's just like I don't I don't imagine walls. I don't know in that particular context. Yeah. So yeah, I think video games could be a good way to go and look for inspiration.
Yeah, I think there has been quite some development in terms of VR and AR and all of that. And I know during COVID there was some attempts to do this kind of exhibitions, but I don't think they were really successful because maybe just the technology is not there yet. I really don't know what's the purpose, or we also want to kind of go to festivals, go to exhibitions to detach from all of this digital, So
Hmm. But
yeah,
I
but I
think people
also,
go to festival because they want to meet human beings.
of
And the
course.
problem of the worlds is that we don't meet people, and what we want is to discuss, to see. This is why the title of the rencontre, which means meeting, it's so uh, cleverly chosen by François Hebel when I mean by the creator of the festival. But yeah, I think I remember now. You mentioned those moments of COVID, but yeah, it's not something that we have already grasped.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mm.
because there, as I told you, I work also in the field of light art, and we were talking
Yes.
because we do live quite a big footprint. We do need to go to see festivals because we do want to experience things, because with light art it's a little bit different, at least for
Mm.
me. You need to feel it, but we were talking about a possibility of maybe meeting together in a virtual space and experiencing some things. But I just don't think yet that there's the people and technology there yet, like so progressive that it would allow that. But let's see what happens in the future. It's
I think
really
that you have a point there about the progressive people, and I think it's what European platforms and European institutions are going through, is that young teenagers from even until 18 years old, they don't go to the shows. They
Mhm.
think that what we do is boring. They don't like these things hanging in the walls, and they don't feel also incorporating the stories, because as well we have seen now the colonization, and we are opening the spaces for different cultures, for different people, specifically women that need to be represented in those institutions. So I think those are the those are the places that need also to solve their own problems by using probably this technology, because it's quite expensive. I mean, I
Yeah,
was wondering how much is to make a video game. It's I think I still
it's
think it.
much more expensive than an exhibition in print. Like I'll tell you in terms of the more immersive shows, the prices go beyond 50 or 100,000 euros. So with that amount, some countries can do a proper photography festival, not just one exhibition. So it's
Exactly.
probably also, if you want to do it well and a bit more complex, because what I really loved about your presentation was also you said that complex stories need this complex way of displaying them. And
Hmm.
I think if you want to do it kind of properly and with a bit more thought, it's going to become extremely expensive. So then,
Yes.
yeah, then it's a question also how much resources it uses and how ecological it is, even
Hmm.
if it's like in a like digital landscape. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's something I keep on thinking about. Yeah.
But okay, now we have another a bit longer question from Alejandra. So I'm showing it here on the screen, but she's saying that you mentioned that the director of the festival said that the project wasn't
Hmm.
finished for him. So what do you think about the projects having to adapt to this Occidental perspective in order to be ready? And even when in the territory where it was created, it's already presenting the subject in a very complete way. Do you think it's necessary to adapt the work to these institutions or external perspectives, or should we push our own narratives in our own ways?
I know. I think it's very clear, Alejandra. This it's up to each of you, each of us. This depends where you live, where you're gonna go with this. What are your perspective in life with the project like this one? Uh, what I think is that, of course, when it comes to the story, I mean, it doesn't matter if he is the director of the festival or he is your mom or someone from the team that is working with you, is that they what I wanted to say on that part of my lecture is that actually you need to show the project to someone who doesn't know the project in order for him or her to help you to really make the story clear. Now, talking to Western perspective, I think we are here, at least myself, I'm here also to open to discussion. So for the notion of being a French festival, showing Mapuche community, to me was quite important. To me was quite important to bring the knowledge of a completely different cosmopolitics into the main festival, which will never. I mean, it's very complex to see or very difficult to see South American, Latin American work hanging on those walls. So I think that it will depend on the project and on what each of us want. I don't think you need to adapt. This was a particular decision that the team did. We could say, bye bye, we don't want to be here, so let's go. But the fact of that we thought that this discussion needed to be there is what brought us there. So now, for example, we're doing a show in Mexico, and I mean, we are doing a project about Mexico, and the notion of doing a show in the community using, for example, they said, so we connect to them, we call them to say, what is the main place that you think we should do something. And they mentioned the notion of having flags because they have a specific museum outdoors and they would love to see the show there. So I don't think we need to follow at all Westerns. Westerns has already enough power, but that also give a voice, that raise the voice a little bit on what we are doing. I think that both of these strategy will need to work together. We have to invent our own spaces. That is also a very important thing. It's of course, we, in order to invent spaces, that means inventing methodologies, inventing, our studio could become our own places, but you need to share it. And when it comes to share, because what we do, it's to create a message that needs to be out there. It's important to, of course, get the audience, and that audience is what we need to start also thinking about it. Who is our audience? For who we work? Uh, why are we doing what we do, and how it's the strategy to show it. So it's those questions, I think, are needs to be at the beginning of a project. I roughly mentioned the notion of the diagram, but I think that the diagram should answer those questions. So for who it's the work, how do you get, where do the money come from, for example, for those projects? What is, of course, the message of the project? That it's kind of the heart of it, but for whom, how, and what? I think it's some question that could even be asked before starting the project. Mainly happen to me when doing portfolio reviews is that those questions comes later. They come at the end, or is this very weird also, um, feeling that some photographers have, that I've been working with them. It's that, what are we going to give back to the community? What is what you think we should give back to the community? It's like, you don't even know what the community needs. Many of them say, no, we will bring books back. It's like, they don't care about your books. Why would you want to bring some books to them? Did you ask if that is important for them? Or some of you also might have an idea to bring some pictures back. Okay, so here are your pictures, but maybe they don't need it or they don't want them. So this is a very, very short anecdote, but once the photographers were there, they had to create, they create the studio in order to shoot the pictures. And I remember calling one of the members of the community, because I invite her to be a curator with me in one of the show. And I asked her, what do you think is the best, what was the most incredible exchange you did, or they did through you, through this project? And she was kind of thinking about it. And then she said, I think it's the fact that they put light on that place that was, before we could not use because we was not light. And now, after they did the studio, now it's an incredible place where we can do drop our parties or our events, and now we can use it as a space. I think, I of course discuss it with the photographers later, but it's like, they never thought about it, and that was the exchange that they enjoyed the most. So it's very important in this particular kind of going back and forward for who we work, where to show. It's also to be in permanent discussion to the other side, what the Western have been called the other, and include one person to the project. And back to the main question on this idea, always trying to bring someone from any world. I mean, a normal world somehow. Which I said normal. Of course, it means people need to understand your project, even if they don't know nothing about you, even if they don't know nothing about the story. This is the way to try it, if the project is speaking or not, or if it's a bit silent, even though there is a lot of images.
Thank you, Alejandra. I hope this answered your question. But yeah, Sergio, thank you so much for this insight. My question would also be, because you work in very different kind of places. You work in exhibitions, you work in festivals. You publish papers. How different is approach to this kind of each of the things that you do? And how does also, when you do exhibitions, how does the space define maybe where you start or how you present it, if we talk about like a physical exhibition?
So the work I do as a curator is, as mentioned, this notion of taking care of the artist and taking care of the project. So when I start working with a project, I kind of know. I mean, know it's a bit arrogant. I try to understand where the project could be. So my way is to connect with the directors, and I had the chance by being around in festivals, by being in not necessarily VIP meetings. People are more normal than whatever you can imagine. They're just sitting there. They're just wanting for people to come, and I think that we need to be very happy about our photography world in comparison with the art world. They are very very different, and we have this relationship. So uh, if if I get right the question, it's just that I have to write, of course, somehow what I think that the show will be. I have an idea, of course, of what the festival is. So, for example, I need to study the festival. I need to know what their political agenda is. I need to know what the research is about. Each curator, each director should, in my opinion, have a research. So they're heading somewhere. They are programming in order to go somewhere. So if you know that from the very beginning, as a curator, you have different projects with you that are, that you are carrying somehow. So then you will choose the one that you feel is the correct in order to present it to Uch, which could be, in Poland, or in Arles if it's in France, or in Chile if it's in Chile, or in Mexico if it's in Mexico. And each of that, somehow that means how interested you are in their own um, research. So it's not all about, hey, this is my project, I bring it here, and you need to show it. If you don't understand that that year it's about, I don't know, feminism, protest in uh, Western Africa, why will they choose your project? I mean, it's impossible if your project is not about that. So also be very curious about what the other ones are doing, and not always put yourself on the perspective of like, my project is your project should be definitely incredible, but might not fit on the program, on the agenda. And those agenda for some of the countries comes from above, so that means that you need to read what the culture ministers are doing, depending on how social is the country where you live. That it's, I think, are my way of navigate this world.
Yeah, but it's a great recommendation also for our community just to really do the research. I know everyone keeps repeating that, but I think it's very important to.
Diagrams are very important in this. I always do mapping the project with inside. So you map where are you gonna go, where you gonna, who are the contacts in the field, but then you need to map the project. Who is interested in the project? Who wants to show Mapuche? No one. How do you do?
Mhm.
How do you put the message out if that is urgent? And then you need to start trying to draw your diagram as best as you can in order to then maybe go to Mexico, to Colombia, to see who is working around those issues,
Mhm.
depending on the country. We don't have Americans and North Americans are not doing the same research than England, I mean, than British, than French, than Indians, Australians. They're all working in different things. Even though we have not very happy about this, but we have come to this kind of
Mhm.
weird fashion on one specific subject, and it's been a little bit long to me, but it's gonna move.
Yeah, but I think it has a very global dimension, this project, because also all this disappearance of autochthonic species and, all of that also really affects the soil, everything. So I think it can also be, I think you also need to think, yeah, a little bit on the project itself, but then globally how it kind of fits maybe also different perspectives. Even if the story of eucalyptus, for example, here, it's not our story, but it is very, very interesting because of the things that are happening to the land as well here. So.
Yeah, I mean, of course, you need to understand that some. Yeah, I mean, you're completely right. I mean, the ones that are gonna go and see the work need to also engage with it. It's not. It's not all about just bringing something from very far away and bring it in. You need to involve the theme, not
Mhm.
to change the project, but just to understand how they're gonna be looking at it. And it's
Yeah.
quite. Yeah, it's quite. It's part of a job. Yeah.
We had, I'll say if someone has a question, please post it in a minute or two, because then we're gonna slowly wrap up. But Asif had a question. So I'm not sure if I understand well, but you'll tell me, Sergio. So how do you see this cultural or political perspectives on photographs and any exhibition? Do some perspectives disturb you in curating an exhibition in some specific place?
Do you see this cultural perspective on photo and exhibition? Uh, I think I understand. I will try it. I mean, the notion of perspective that disturbed when curating, I think that this is it will be it happened. It means that when we are bringing together different voices, maybe you will not be in agreement with one. I could be even against the notion of the museum, which is the one that has been collecting and stealing and taking the notion of classification of the world in their hand in order to bring whatever they found in the world and put it in a study place, which are museums. So even though I don't agree with that colonial way of treating nature, for example, and human beings, specifically when it comes to people that they brought some of the museums to have bodies, real bodies, in their own collection. So I don't agree with that discourse, but I think it is important to include it because I don't, depending on the project, but in the one I showed today, it's very important for me that the whole spectrum of perspective were there in order to understand how difficult is the problem. As we said before, this idea of complexity. And yes, no, I don't agree with the museum itself. Even in my research, when I had to go and work with the archive of the museum, I decided not to ask for permission and just use it. So we could be um, in a very small part of our I would say our decisions as a decisions maker. Yeah, we could define strategies in order to not to follow the rules or just to be to find the solutions that you need to find in order to tell the story. But in my particular case, yeah, I took the risk, for example, of using material from a museum and printed in a book without any permission. Nothing happened to us. I'm not saying you should do it. I'm not saying that that's the only way of doing it, but that was my take at that period of time with my book, the one that I show you in the very beginning. So I think that if there is a perspective that disturbs you, I think it's quite interesting. I think this it means that something is happening in the project. I will be quite of afraid if nothing has there is no disturbed. I don't think that it's even possible.
Thank you. And then Asif had a follow-up question about how do you deal with the negative perspective on your photo, but I would maybe expand it here on maybe a project as it is. Like, were there any was there any critique or very harsh kind of experience that you had with your projects?
That means the audience bringing.
Yeah, negative perspective. I'm not really sure. Like, this is the question is here, but I'm not sure if
Negative
it's like
perspective.
a critique or yeah. I would understand this as a kind of
How
critique.
do you deal a negative perspective on your photo? As a critique, I will be very happy. I love negative perspective if that means critique. I think that we should stop going through the world without critics. I think critics has also become lazy, or I have not seen where those critics are. But as far as I am concerned, I've seen that the art world, specifically photography world, has kind of there is a gap somehow. You can do whatever you want to do, and then critics in the newsprint, critics in media, blogs, some websites. Yeah, it's no. I think we've lost the power of critic, and I think critic can be very constructive, and this is why it is. I mean, negative if someone doesn't use the right word to talk to you about your work, that is a language problem, and that is the problem of could be also very personal. But if someone has an argument to talk to you about the problems that you have in your work or the problems that our exhibition could bring in, you do things with your own team perspective, but you could be wrong, which I'm not against. Once again, I think that critics are there, and as a curator, I am very critic within my teams. I'm like, no, this is not working, guys. You should change the angle. You have to go again. This is not working on the story. So I will say use the critics as much as you can in order to construct. Uh, don't don't bring it personal. I mean, and if someone really hurts you, that it's someone as a person you need to be careful with that person, because you could be critic, but you don't need to hurt anyone. It's important to be critic in a project, in a way, in a methodology, in an approach, but it's never personal. So, and I've seen, I think that it makes me feel like that question has a little bit of a, that someone has refused or has been quite negative through a project. Uh, Try to really understand if that it's someone who is hitting you, or it's just someone who really is pushing you to make it better. If that is the second case, engage with that and then push it forward, because I think that is what is it's missing in the construction of the projects, and also in the ends, which I mentioned about the critic that newsprints or art critics. And that's what we keep on discussing, that if we put more critics around, maybe we're going to do things even better. But it has to be constructive. If not, then yeah, careful with those people.
I hope this answered your question. Well, I think we're going to have quite a bit more dialogue in 2 weeks' time. When you have the workshop, I'll just share now my screen. So now it's my time to do it, and I didn't check how I do it. Okay. Allow. Okay, let's see if this will work. So if you go on the website, if you're logged into Seven Community, you should see under events. You should see the event on the workshop that Sergio will have on October 1st. So if you would like to discuss more with Sergio about your project, please apply. We had a few applications already, so there's limited spaces, just so you know, so you can do it as soon as possible. Here are the instructions on what you need to submit.
Be
Um,
generous. Be generous.
um, so yes, submit only unfinished projects. This is what Sergio kind of added as a special note. But maybe asking a question: what are for you unfinished projects, Sergio? Those that were not
Those
exhibited yet, those that are just like
those that
chapters.
those like you don't know what to do with them. Those ones that you are blocked. Those ones that you cannot finish. Those ones that you think that are wrong. Somehow we always kind of stop in a project because we cannot go further. Yeah, and not finish also, maybe not edit. Like I always said, I'm sorry about this, but it's like photographers are very bad editors. So bring everything in order for me to help, to look, to get inspired by also your work, in order to look for different layers to tell those narratives.
Great, yeah. Well, the deadline for submissions is September 22nd, but as I said, do it as soon as you manage. And I will just ask you, because many times we do receive photos as an email attachment, or we get links that expire. So I just ask you to really use Dropbox, or now we use, because I know that WeTransfer expires quite often, Swiss Transfer, which is another way. Or yeah, you can send me a drive link, but please, yeah, just don't touch it, so I can then quickly collect everything and then share it with Sergio, even already before the workshop. But yeah, we will see how many spots, but from 4 to 6 is our usual. Just so you know, and if you'll need more information on the workshop and how to apply, obviously you can always contact me. So yeah, this was also about the workshop. So we'll see again, Sergio, in 2 weeks' time.
Thank you
But
so much.
yeah, I want to thank you so much for the time, and really for this super inspiring project presentation, and for kind of your background and also how you approach curating. It's always interesting to see different perspectives. So we really appreciate it. Even if you go more into this kind of artistic side of projects as well, I think even for a community that's more focused on documentary projects, on photojournalism, I think it's so important to also get this kind of perspectives, because I do know we have a lot of community members working on like very long-term projects that are really multi-layered. So I think this is really much appreciated for all of us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And then I always said it's more important that taking pictures is to tell how to tell the story. So which is to me the most important side of image making and that narrative as a whole. So yeah, thank you so much. And for the ones that I will see you, well, in 2 weeks. So yeah, happy to share more time with you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sergio. Have a good time in Paris, and to the community, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you all in 2 weeks' time. Have a
Thank
good
you very
evening
much.
or morning. Bye
Bye
bye.
bye, everyone.